Welcome to the Podkey summary of First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Today's story is really about how 5 short freedoms turned into a huge part of American public life: religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. It starts as a political compromise in the 1790s, then expands through the courts to cover states, schools, protests, newspapers, membership groups, and now the internet too. And the whole way through, the theme is the same. The First Amendment protects a lot more than polite conversation. The First Amendment was adopted on December 15, 1791, but it actually began life as the third of 12 proposed amendments. The first 2 didn't get ratified, so the one covering religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition slid into the number 1 slot. That whole Bill of Rights push was a compromise meant to calm anti-federalist fears that the new Constitution didn't do enough to protect basic liberties. George Mason had argued early for a Bill of Rights, and James Madison ended up drafting and introducing the amendments that Congress sent to the states. At first, the First Amendment limited only Congress. It did not automatically restrain state or local governments. That changed gradually through the 14th Amendment and the Incorporation Doctrine, with free speech starting to get applied against the states in Gitlow v. New York in 1925. Religious protections came in through separate cases, including Cantwell v. Connecticut for free exercise in 1940 and Everson v. Board of Education for establishment in 1947. One important plain language point here: the First Amendment generally restrains government actors, not private parties. So private platforms, employers, and organizations usually are not constitutionally bound the way a city council or public school would be, unless they're actually functioning as the government. The religion clauses pull in 2 directions at once. The Establishment Clause says, government can't promote religion, while the Free Exercise Clause means government also can't make religious practice impossible or unfairly burden it. The military chaplain example shows the tension nicely. If the government pays chaplains, that can look like establishment. But if it refuses chaplains entirely, soldiers may lose any practical way to practice their faith. The deeper idea the court has described is neutrality. No religious control of government, and no governmental control of religion. That means protection not just against an official national church, but also against favoritism among denominations and against hostility toward religion itself. How to draw the line is still contested. Jefferson's famous phrase about a wall of separation became influential through Everson, but critics like Chief Justice William Rehnquist said that metaphor rests on shaky history. And after Kennedy v. Bremerton School District in 2022, the court moved away from the old Lemon test and put more weight on historical practices and understandings. If there's a heartland of First Amendment law, it's political speech. Modern doctrine protects speech, even when it's unpopular, offensive, wrong, or deeply irritating, which honestly is a lot of political speech on a normal Tuesday. The court in Terminiello said, speech can provoke dispute and even anger, and that's part of its democratic function. The key modern limit comes from Brandenburg v. Ohio in 1969. Advocacy of force can be punished only when it's intended and likely to produce imminent lawless action. That was a major shift from the World War I era, when convictions under the Espionage Act were upheld under the much narrower, clear, and present danger framework. The larger constitutional instinct now is to preserve breathing space for political debate, because if every heated argument can be treated as dangerous, free politics shrinks fast. First Amendment protection also reaches symbolic speech and compelled speech. Flag burning counts as protected expression under Texas v. Johnson. Students keep some speech rights at school, even if those rights are not unlimited. And the government generally can't force people to salute the flag, recite the pledge, or subsidize a union's political speech. The principle underneath all of that is simple enough. Government usually can't tell you what political message you must carry, any more than it can easily ban the one you want to express. Free speech is broad, but it is not absolute. The court has still left room to punish obscenity under the Miller test, child pornography, defamation, misleading commercial speech, incitement, true threats, and fighting words. At the same time, the court has protected some deeply offensive expression when it does not amount to a direct threat or unlawful provocation. In Snyder v. Phelps, for example, protesters carrying anti-gay signs at a military funeral were still protected. And in National Institute of Family and Life Advocates v. Becerra, the court rejected the idea that there's some blanket professional speech exception where the Constitution suddenly steps aside. There's also a right to receive information. Stanley v. Georgia recognized a strong privacy interest in reading books or watching films at home, rejecting the notion that government gets to police your thoughts because the material is unpopular. The Free Press Clause is not just about a special club of licensed journalists. In Lovell v. City of Griffin, the press was understood broadly as basically every form of publication carrying information or opinion, which now comfortably stretches to books, films, games, blogs, and social media. One of the strongest rules here is the rule against prior restraint, meaning censorship before publication. Cases like Near v. Minnesota and New York Times v. United States say the government bears an exceptionally heavy burden if it wants to stop publication in advance, with only narrow exceptions like immediate threats involving troop movements or national security. The press is supposed to expose official abuse and keep power uncomfortable, which is a constitutional job description if there ever was one. But the government also can't force a newspaper to print content. It rejects. Miami Herald v. Tornillo protected the paper's right not to speak as well as its right to publish. The amendment also protects collective participation, including rights that are partly implied rather than listed in one tidy phrase. Freedom of association includes privacy of membership. NAACP v. Alabama recognized that forcing disclosure of members can intimidate people and chill participation. Assembly and petition matter for the same reason. They protect organized political action, not just filing a complaint at City Hall. Petitioning includes lobbying, filing lawsuits, asking legislatures to change the law, and communicating with all three branches of government. The old congressional gag rule against anti-slavery petitions is a vivid reminder that shutting down petitioning can be a way of shutting down a movement. And public streets and parks remain classic places for meetings, organizing, and spreading political information, as long as the assembly stays peaceable. None of this froze in the 18th century. The same principles keep getting applied to new technology. During the crypto wars in the 1990s, courts treated computer source code and strong encryption as expressive activity, and versions of that argument still show up in fights over privacy tools, cryptocurrencies, 3D printed gun files, and digital rights management circumvention. In Packingham v. North Carolina, the court described modern online platforms as places where people speak and listen, and it struck down a law that broadly barred registered sex offenders from accessing social media. That case shows old public forum ideas being carried into internet spaces that now function a lot like public squares, even if they're owned by private companies. Campaign spending has also been treated as a form of political expression in cases like Buckley v. Valeo, Citizens United v. FEC, and McCutcheon v. FEC, where the court protected or expanded constitutional limits on regulating contributions and independent spending. So the First Amendment starts as a short list of protections and turns into a whole architecture for public life. How people worship, argue, publish, organize, and push back. It's messy by design, and that's kind of the point. Thanks for listening. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.